All right, so the data for this lesson is part of the Data Carpentry workshop, which is what I'm leveraging today. And specifically, this data set is a teaching version of the Studying African Farmer-Led Irrigation database. So this represents interviews of farmers in 2 countries in Eastern Sub-Saharan Africa, so specifically Mozambique and Tanzania. These interviews were conducted between November 2016 and June 2017, and probed household features such as construction materials used, a number of household members, agriculture practices and assets, and so on. And so this data set has been purposely messed up for the session. So there's a lot of errors and different things in there and for us to practice on. I'll skip through then the rest of the setup and get on to the next part, the introduction. So what is OpenRefine used for? So if you haven't, if you're not familiar with the software, it used to be called Google Refine, but it provides you with a set of tools to allow you to identify and amend messy data. So essentially, data can be very messy. It allows you to clean data. It's also important to know what you did with your data. Many journals and granting agencies and other institutions, especially now with the rise of open access, a lot of times they want to know what you did with your data, how you got it, as well as everything that you've done to it after you've collected it. And so with something like OpenRefine, it captures all of the different actions and things that you do to your data so that you can easily download it and attach it as an amendment or an appendix to your research. And so this is just one way of showing what you did with your data. Also, the plus of using something like OpenRefine as opposed to a regular spreadsheet software, actions are very easily reversed in OpenRefine. You can quickly undo, redo actions, that sort of thing, which we'll get into. And it always saves your work to a new file. It does not modify your original data set. So it's always has a copy of it and doesn't modify the original. Data cleaning steps often need repeating with multiple files, so it keeps track of all your actions and allows you to apply them to other data sets. Some concepts such as clustering algorithms are quite complex, but OpenRefine makes it easy to introduce them and show them their power. So some features of OpenRefine: it's an open source software, which is all on GitHub. It's a very large growing community online. They maintain a wiki. I think it's like openrefine.org or something like that. You can find pretty much everything that you need in terms of OpenRefine in there. And the great thing is that this session is going to go really quick today, but you can always refer to the wiki for any type of commands or syntax that I use, or there's a lot of things that I won't be having time to cover today, and you can locate that all within the wiki. So it works with large-ish data sets. So about 100,000 rows is what it is optimized for. You can adjust memory allocation to have a even larger data set, but that's roughly 100,000 rows is what we're working with. And it always keeps your data private on your computer until you choose to share it. It works by running a small server on your computer and using your web browser to interact with it, but your private data never leaves the computer. So as I mentioned before, openrefine.org is where you can find videos, resources, the wiki, anything that you need assistance with on that. Okay, so now I want to jump right into creating a new OpenRefine project. So hopefully that you have downloaded the data set and you're able to open it. So OpenRefine can import a variety of file types, such as TSV, so tab separated, comma separated, CSV, Excel, JSON, XML, RDF, and Google Spreadsheets. But specifically, we are going to work with something that is a CSV file. So if you have your OpenRefine, it should automatically be open to create project and then get data from this computer. So I'm going to choose files here and then scroll down and open one of my downloads of this and then click on next. Okay, so this opens what is called a preview. And so it allows you to do a lot of things in the preview to save you some steps at, near the end of the project. And one of them is something that is newer with newer additions or of the software, and that is to trim leading and trailing white space. So a lot of times with white space, which is simply a space before or after a word, you visually may not be able to see it, but the computer recognizes it as a space, and that can really mess up its data, and because it's something that the computer recognizes as something separate. So something as simple as a space after a word can really throw things off. So with the newer editions of OpenRefine, which hopefully most of us would be using the most recent edition, if not, I think I'm using a slightly older version. I'm using 3.61, but that's okay. Everything after 3.6 is perfectly fine. But on the bottom here, I am going to click on trim leading and trailing white space from strings. This saves me from doing it later in the presentation, so that I don't have to manually add it. Pretty much everything else here, there's a lot that you can do, but I'm going to leave everything as is. This looks perfectly fine to me. And I can rename the project up here. So I'm going to do session-1 OpenRefine. Okay. And then I'm going to click on create project. So uploading a file is one of the most common ways to upload a data set. You can do it via a URL, like if you had a web address and the URL points to data in a file type that OpenRefine understands, but this is the easiest way in which I'm able to work with it. So one thing before we get started with the OpenRefine is I like to expand the amount of rows that it shows, because it can limit if you're searching for something or filtering a column. It can be very limiting if it's only showing 10 rows. So I would choose 50 to 100. With today's session, so you're able to see, because the errors sometimes are very spread out in the document. So I find it easier to switch to 100 rows. So one of the most useful features of OpenRefine is something called facets, and that's what we're going to start with today. Facets and filters can be a bit confusing, but hopefully by the end of it, you'll be able to understand a little better what the difference between them are. So facets can help you get an overview of the data in a project, as well as help you bring more consistency to the data. OpenRefine supports faceted browsing as a mechanism for seeing a bigger picture of your data or filtering down to just a subset of rows that you want to change in bulk. So one of the simplest tools you can use is what's called a text facet. And that's to make changes to large amounts of data. Now, you can go to an individual cell and make changes. So for example, if you hover here, you can see the edit shows up in blue. You click on edit, and then you can manually make the change. However, if you have multiple errors, that's going to take a really long time to first find and then make the changes. But if you happen to have a one-off, you can make the change via that way. Trying to find and group all of the errors, the easiest way is to start with a text facet. So we're going to work with the village column, and it's about 8 or 9 columns in. You can also do Control F and type village if you're having trouble, depending on how small your screen is. And you're going to click on the down arrow here. You're going to click facet and then text facet. The text facet box should then open on the left-hand side. So you should see every unique value that exists in the village column, along with a number representing how many times that value occurs. So right now it's just going by A to Z, but if you want it to sort by count, you could do that as well to see which village name is the most common in that. So you might notice that there's something a little off about the data. and I'm going to give you the answer, but for this case, there's a few different ones. So first off, I see the number 49. Likely that is not the name of the village. And it's probably referring to some other data, some other row or column within the data set that was simply put in there wrong. And it might take a little bit to find, and it's not something that we're really going to get into today, but sometimes you are able to infer where that data may be coming from. So for example, if there was another column right beside it that was all a numeric value, you might be able to guess that, oh, this is actually referring to this village and make the connection yourself. But it's not always that easy to catch. So if I hover over any of these, I am able to make edit right here, and I can type in a new answer. So one thing I noticed right off the bat, and I don't know how to really pronounce this, but Chirodozo, it looks like majority of them, 37 of them spell it this way, and then this one has an extra O and spells it this way. You can then infer that likely that one outlier has misspelled it. So we can edit this directly and simply remove the O and apply like that. And then it will hopefully make the change. But you can use this to fix an error immediately, and OpenRefine will ask whether you want to make the same correction to every value it finds, like that one. But OpenRefine offers even better ways to find and fix errors, which we'll use instead. So I'm just going to pull up the solution here. So again, these ones right here likely are all referring to Ruwaka, I think is how you would say that. So I could then make the change here. You missed the O. Needed to be moved, not removed. Thank you. That would help. So let's see if that one worked. Okay, perfect. Yes, exactly. I was wondering why it didn't make the change right away. Nope, still didn't do that right. There we go. Thank you very much, Wade. All right, I'm going to make changes to these ones as well. I'm going to remove the last part of the name. And this one is missing an A. Apply it here. Perfect. All right. Okay. So I'm just looking, skipping some of the lesson parts. So that is simply, that's one of the more simpler features is the text facet. So then I'm able to kind of make those changes. And I'm also going to look at the interview date column. So I can exit this one now that I've kind of fixed up these. This one right here, I'm going to leave for now because we don't really know what the correct answer is yet. So we're just going to kind of leave it. But we know that that one does exist. All right, so I'm going to go to interview date here. And looking at if this column is formatted as a text or date. So even though this looks like it's formatted as a date, I think this is another thing that you are able to do, and I'm skipping ahead a little bit with transformations, but with interview date, you can click on the arrow here and you can click on edit cells and then common transformations, and then you can change to date. And this is what the date format looks like. The other one that was there looked like a date, but it was actually in text format. So with things like with facets, it allows you to view the data in a different way and make changes. So in this case, I can then change the interview date column from the text version of dates to the actual date version. And obviously this goes right down to the minute and second, which most of the information does not have, but I can now change that to the date facet. Okay. Well, geez, I'm just looking to see if I missed anything in this. So there are a bunch of different types of facets that we won't get to discuss today. So text facets is one way to organize and look at a subset of the data. You can also do numeric facets. So if you had a column of numbers, you could look at it that way. There's custom facets, scatter plot facets, and a whole bunch of others. So numeric and scatterplot facets display graphs instead of a list of values. And the numeric facet graph includes drag and drop controls that you can use to start in to set a start and an end range to filter the data displayed. And then there are a bunch of different types of custom facets as well. And a lot of those are something that you would want to explore throughout the wiki and how you would apply those. But that is kind of the more straightforward way in which you can begin looking at smaller subsets of data. All right. Clustering is another way. So there's facets that you can look at a small subset of the data to find errors, but a clustering is another type of tool that you can use to find possible typing errors. So clustering simply means finding groups of different values that might be alternative representations of the same thing. For example, the word New York capitalized and New York not capitalized are very likely referring to the same concept. They just simply have capitalization differences. So clustering is a tool for cleaning data sets which contain misspelled or mistyped entries. So again, we're going to work with the village column here like we did before. And I'm going to click on nope, that's the wrong one. Years farm. I'm going to exit out. Okay. I'm going to click on text facet. And so you see here in the top right, there's the cluster button. So I'm going to click on the cluster button. Hopefully the pop-up window is still viewable to the participants. I tried to share my whole window. But there are a bunch of different methods and keying functions to recognize errors. So for the first combination that we're going to use the key collision method, which is already the default, and then the metaphone 3. Oh, thank you, Alexander. So under the keying function, we're going to choose the third one, which is metaphone 3. And it should identify 2 clusters. It's not because I made the changes and didn't. I'm going to go back here for just a second. My apologies. So I'm going to actually show you the undo redo function right now. So I was trying to show you a different way to fix errors, but I had already fixed them, so nothing was showing. So let's go back to here. So I'm clicking on undo redo and I'm going back all the way basically to the start. I want to undo all those manual changes that I made to those so I'm able to show you how clustering works because I find clustering very, very helpful. Okay, so perfect. So everything looks like it's back to the way it should be. Okay, now I'm going to click on cluster. Key collision under method and then metaphone 3. There we go. Now that's working. So you should find that using the default settings, for example, you're able to merge some of the ones here. So for example, it's recognizing the errors. Like before when I was using the text facet, I had to kind of I'm able to visually see the errors, but in this place, OpenRefine is recognizing the errors for me. And it's essentially guessing and saying, these two are probably the same. They're a cluster. Do you want me to merge them or not? And the way that some of these different, say, keying functions work is that they kind of go by like a radius. So you can set them, for example, like you want them to look at something within a certain distance from the original value. And there's different ways that you can kind of play around with it. And the wiki is the best way to explore a lot of those. But in this case, I'm just going to work with this one. So it's picking up two here. So I'm going to click on merge, and then click merge selected and recluster. Perfect. But let me try another one. So to merge these values, edit and manually change the names. So I'm going to try nearest neighbor and then choose ppm. I'm going to change the radius to 4. See if that did anything. Okay. Perfect. So this was able to pick up some other ones as well. The Chiridazo, I don't know how to pronounce that, so I apologize. I'm completely butchering it. And I'm going to link this in the chat so that you're able to follow along here, so that if you're having trouble remembering the method and the different things here. And so I'm able to then click on these two, click merge selected and recluster. Perfect. Then I'm going to select close, and you can see that this was able to make all of the changes that I was able to manually do before. Does anyone have any questions so far about the text facet or using clustering? So I'm also going to link here in the chat information. Oh, that link is no good anymore. Let me do a quick Google search for openrefine.org clustering. Here we go. They updated everything a few months ago and didn't update on the site. There we go. Sorry about that. I just put it in the chat. So it has a little bit more about how these clustering, how the clustering function works and that sort of thing. So the simplest difference between key collision method and nearest neighbor method is that key collisions are very fast and can process millions of cells in seconds, versus the nearest neighbor method, which is a slower method that allows the user to set a radius like I did, which is a threshold for matching or not matching. And again, it's a bit of a complex way of kind of looking at it, but I do find that the wiki helps kind of break down. Diane, I think you had a question there. Feel free to come on the mic if you'd like.
Yeah, I was just wondering if there's a way that you can manually adjust any of those. So say that it was capturing most of what you wanted in the cluster, but there was a few stragglers that you could see should go in a cluster, but it wasn't picking up. Can you tell it to add to a cluster?
Yeah, like you can kind of play around with it. Specifically, the nearest neighbor threshold, you can kind of change the radius, and because it's basically it is a bit slower method, but you can set the threshold for matching or not matching. So then it might be able to, if you set a bigger threshold, it may include some things that are not errors, but you're able ultimately to make the choice if it is or not. That is one way. So increasing the radius. Or the other way is just simply using the text facet filter and manually changing them yourself. If it doesn't seem to be picking up anything, it really depends on the size of your data set, because, if you're only working with a few hundred or few thousand rows, using the drop down, clicking on village, and then the arrow, the facet, and the text facet is probably the, one of the quicker ways for you to visually see it, especially something like this where there appears to only be five or six different villages. No, actually, three. So there's, you're working with a really small amount of values. So something like this, using the text facet filter is easier. If you're working with many more values, it would be difficult. You could do it this way, or you could try using the clustering and playing around with the different ones before you're able to pick up something. Does that kind of answer your question?
It does. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. All right, so those are the text facets and the clustering. Both are ways to view subsets of your data and specifically pick up errors and make changes to them. And I won't get a whole lot of time to go through that, but hopefully you got kind of a sense of it, and you have some resources that you can look into if you want to, build upon your knowledge of something like that. Okay, the next thing I want to talk about is transforming data. So there are multiple ways to transform data within OpenRefine. And one of the ways is through something called General Refine Expression Language. So it's GREL. Is what it stands for. And it's a type of regular expressions. If you've ever heard of regular expressions or regex, they're shorthand commands that allow you to perform a function on multiple values or rows in this case. Regex, if you've ever have seen it, it looks very confusing. And the same is to be said of the GREL or General Refine Expression Language that is used within OpenRefine. So this is another thing that you'd have to look up a lot of the commands. It's not something that, maybe if you use it a lot, you can begin to memorize it, but it's something that I would have to look through the wiki to get some commands that I might want to use. But specifically, I'm going to copy and paste the 4 commands that we're going to be using today to transform the data. So I want to work with a list, and it's the items owned column. So items owned is quite far, I think, in it. So I'm going to do Control F and then click on items owned. And then there's an items owned other, but we're not going to be working with that one. So it's just the items owned. So if you look at this column, you can see that there are multiple values within this column. And there are a few extra characters in there, specifically square brackets, single quotation marks, and white spaces. So I would like to get rid of that. And there are a bunch of different ways, but the quickest way is using regular expressions. So I am going to then click on the down arrow here, go down to Edit Cells, and then go to Transform. So it should open up this window here that allows you to see the values. And this is where you're going to write your syntax. So I'm going to exit out of this, and I'm going to copy and paste the syntax that I'm using. And you have the shorthand commands only do one thing at a time. So if you have 2 brackets, it's only going to remove 1 at a time. So in this case, we're going to have a few different steps, but it's going to work really quickly. So first, we're going to remove the left square bracket. So I'm copying and pasting the command here in the chat, and you're going to enter it in here, the expression, and it shows you your original one on the left-hand side, and then it's going to show you what it's going to replace it with. And so now you see on the right-hand side, the left square bracket is gone. So then I can click on OK. So I'm going to go back in, click on the down arrow, edit cells, and transform. And then I'm going to get my second command for the right-hand side. Enter this in, Okay, and it lets me do a little preview, and now I see all the right square brackets are gone. Okay, and then click on OK. And the last two things that I want to remove, so the square brackets are gone. I want to remove the single quotation marks, and I want to remove the white spaces. Go down to Edit Cells and Transform. Here is the command for the quotation marks. Just putting it in the chat. You can copy and paste. And I'll copy and paste it here. Okay. They're gone. And then go back in and do the last one here, which is to remove any spaces that it may have that weren't caught in the original trimming, leading, and trailing white space. Okay. So one thing too with using something like the regex and the regular expressions is that it keeps track of a history of all the commands that you've used. So let's say you are going and copying and pasting them somewhere like from here, or maybe you're using the wiki. You can then go to the history and you can reuse them. So if I was to then apply this to another column, and I wanted to do the exact same thing, because there are multiple columns that have square brackets and commas and all that, you don't have to copy and paste them every single time. Once you've put them in there once, the history will be there, and then I can click reuse and apply it to other columns. So that's something that is really helpful to use. So I'm just going to enter this in, and then I've transformed all of my columns. And now it's cleaned it right up, and all the values are very neatly organized. Could I get some green check marks or thumbs up if you were able to follow along with that? Awesome. Okay, perfect. Lots of green check marks. All right. So now that we've cleaned up the characters from the item's own column, we can use a text facet then to see which items were commonly owned or rarely owned by the interview respondents. So I'm going to click on the items owned right here, and I'm going to do facet and then custom text facet. So because there are multiple values nestled in one box, essentially, or one cell, sorry, the word I was looking for, it can be really hard to organize them and to recognize them as each as separate values within that one cell. So to do something like that, you would need regex. And specifically, it is this command here. So it's value.split. So I'm going to just put it in the chat there. So if you're able to follow along, it was facet and then custom text facet. And then we're going to copy and paste our syntax right here. Okay, so I'm just going to exit out of my old thing. But now we are able to see that it was able to parse out all the individual values in that cell and rank them by how many times it was listed or used in the whole spreadsheet. So if, for example, if I wanted to know which items were most commonly owned and which ones were least commonly owned, I could manually search through this list, or I could sort by the count. So is somebody able to put in the chat what is the most commonly used item? Mobile phone. Yes, thank you. Mobile phone. It's tied with radio. Yeah. Thank you, Graham. And so then if I was looking at what is the least commonly owned item, I can scroll down to the bottom and it's a computer and also cars. So so yeah, that is a way that you can parse out and use the text facet filter on a cell that has multiple values. Does anyone have any questions so far about transformations and using regex? And that was a very, very quick introduction to regex. It's there's a lot more, and if there's any librarians here, they might be a little bit more familiar with regex than others. But I have a question. So what if some of the cells use commas instead of semicolons? I'm having this issue with a spreadsheet of subject headings. So they use commas instead. Oh, okay. I get you, to separate them. Trying to think, but only some of them. Some you. Oh,
Does
yeah.
it mix them? Are you
Pardon?
getting both commas and semicolons, or
Yeah.
is it just one? If it's just one, you could do the same split on comma. If it was a mix of both, I'd be inclined to first replace, instead of a spaces or blanks like we did, I'd replace all the commas with semicolons or vice versa, and then carry on with the split.
Yeah, thank you very much. Does that make sense, Kara? Awesome. Thank you for your question. How much time do we have? Okay, I might go through and do that with another one, just, to spend a little bit more time on this one. So let's do let's clean up another column, is what I was trying to say. And I want to work with the months lack food column. So in this case, to locate it, I'm going to do Control F, and then I'm going to type in months. Okay, so there's months no water, and I don't want that one. I'm going to go to the next one. Okay, this one here. So I'm also going to use the cleaning steps. Specifically, I'm going to replace and get rid of the square brackets and the single quotation marks and that sort of thing. So using all of the syntax that I copied and pasted in the chat, you can then go and apply it to this column. So the months lack food, we're going to click on the arrow, and then we're going to click on edit cells and transform. Now you could copy and paste them, maybe if you weren't, but if you were able to follow along like we were before, then you should be able to reuse the ones that you've already put in there. So I'm going to click on reuse here. I think it only lets me do one at a time. Okay, so we'll do the first one. We'll do the left quotation marks. Okay, awesome. It got rid of them. I'm going to go back in and do the history. And I want to reuse the right square bracket. Go back into my history. And I want to replace, here is my single quotation mark. I think it's one of these. Use, and then get rid of the spaces. And transform history. I think it's this one. All right, perfect. So that looks very similar to the other items column that I was working with. So we cleaned it up like the other one. I'll give people just a second or two to do that, and then we will do a custom text facet and look at what were the most common months that lacked food. Okay, just giving you a second. Okay, and then now we're going to go back into, so we're going to go to facet. We're going to go to custom text facet. And then I'm going to go to my history here, and I'm going to reuse the split one that we got to split all of the values. And then click on OK. Okay. So it's opening up a facet box on the left-hand side. And just like before, I can sort by name, or I can sort by count. So I can see then that November was the most common month for the participants to lack food. And that May was the least common. So there's a bunch more exercises to kind of practice doing that. That is in the lesson that I copy and pasted, but we won't get a chance to go through them. But hopefully everyone was able to follow along with the transformations okay, and you can always message a chat if you're having any issues. But that's a very quick introduction to using regular expressions within OpenRefine. So as I mentioned, the undo redo feature was next in the lesson, but I used it earlier. But if you happen to miss that, undo redo is, you can click here at the left-hand side, and you can go back however far. If, for example, that you wanted to undo a lot of the things that you've been working with, you can do that. Or maybe you undid it and then you decided that you wanted to go back. You can also redo things as well. So it's really great that it keeps track of every single step that you do in such a clear way that you can go back. How do you download a list of your changes? That's a very good question, Karina. So we will, I'll show you at the end that there's a bunch of different ways that you can do that. So one way is by extracting right here. And again, I'll cover this at the end, but one way to get a list of all the changes that you've made, if that's what you're just looking for is the changes, you can export it or extract it, here, and then you can click and paste the ones that you want to include in your document. And then this is essentially a JSON script, and you can copy and then paste it into a text editor. And that is a way to keep track of all your changes. It can then be applied, those changes, to another data set. If you happen to have an identical one, you could easily apply it to another one, but that's essentially the quickest way to show you that. Okay, I don't want to undo and redo anything that I did yet. Okay, I move to the next part. Okay. All right, so now we're going to work with filtering. So we can, there are many entries in our data table, obviously, so we can filter it to work on a subset of the data in the list for the next set of operations. So to use a filter, we are going to work with the respondent roof type column. So I'm going to exit out of my facet here on the left-hand side and use my Control F and just type in respond, just the first few letters, and that should pick up a bunch of different respondent columns. And I'm specifically looking to work with the respondent roof type. I'm going to click on the arrow here, and then I'm going to click on text filter. The filter works very similar to the Control F. So essentially you can start typing a word, the first few characters, and it will pick up and match a few ones. And the more characters that you write, or if you write the full word, it will only capture the exact matches. So for example, to see how that works specifically within OpenRefine because Control F allows you to locate one at a time, but if you want to see the full list, you can use something like the filtering option. So I'm going to start typing in Mabat. So M-A-B-A-T. So you can see that it filtered and brought up all of the roof types that start with Mabat. So there should be I think around 58 matching rows of the original 131 rows. And so there are two roof types then that I'm able to see from this. So I'm able, if I keep scrolling down, if you have at least 50 or 100 rows open, so Mabit sloping, I don't know how to say that, is one of the answers, and the other one is Mabat to pitched. So it looks like there's two main types of Mabit roof types. So I'm going to go into here, and I'm going to click on facet and then text facet. And so it's picking up, I scrolled through and looked for the two kinds, but it's essentially, this is a way to then look at this filter that I have set. So I've set a filter to catch the first 5 characters of the word, and then this facet is breaking it down and showing me the 2 choices that are available under respondent roof type that start with Mabat. If you only wanted to restrict to one of these roof types, you could include more in your filter. The more that you type of a full, the more characters that you type in a full word, the more that it will return exact matches. So that is essentially how a filter works. So it's very similar to Control F. Just going back to my agenda here, making sure that I never missed anything. So faceting and filtering sound and look very similar, and it can be hard, and I find it personally confusing sometimes too. So a good distinction between the two is that faceting gives you an overview description of all of the data that is currently selected, while filtering allows you to select a subset of your data for analysis. So I know that sounded really, that sounded like I was essentially talking about the same thing, but it's when you start to use it more, you get a hang of the different ways that a facet allows you to organize something versus a filter. So yeah, that's essentially how they work. They're used in combination with each other. And they're some of the 2 main functions and features that you use within OpenRefine. In addition to text, the simple text filtering feature that I showed you, another way to narrow your filter even more is to use the include or exclude entries in a facet. So I'm just going to exit out of these here on the left-hand side. So I'm going to look at a new facet for this respondent roof type. So as you can see, once I exited out of those facets on the left-hand side, it reverted everything back to normal. So now I can see the other roof types here as well. So I'm going to click on the menu. I'm going to click on facet and then text facet. Perfect. So I can I can choose the entries with names that agree with your text filter. So for example, I can, if I click on, you can click on edit or include here. So in this case, I want to include both of these. And so there's really only 3 roof types here. So it's again, working with very small sets of values. But this is simply a different way of using the text facet filter. So you can, it essentially is doing the same thing as like a filter would do. So you're getting to manually include or exclude something. And yeah, it looks essentially what we did before, but just a different way of going about doing that. All right. So I'm going to exit out of this again, and that should hopefully return back to where it was. All right. So there's a sorting option, but I think we're going to skip that today. In lieu of time, we're going to look at numbers. So as I mentioned before, when a table or a data set is imported into OpenRefine, all the columns are treated as containing text values. So even though you can change and use a facet like a numeric facet or something, and look at only those with numeric values, that doesn't actually change the data type from text to numbers. So you would need to transform it to make the actual change. So we can transform columns from text to other data, like numbers or date, using the edit cells and common transformations feature. And I had quickly done that before, but we're going to look at changing columns to numbers and see what other things that we're able to do. So I have to make sure I removed any text filters, which I did. So I'm going to work with the years _ farm column. Okay. And that brings it up here. So I'm going to click on the arrow here and edit cells, and then common transformations, and then switch it to number. So one thing that you're going to notice right away is that it changes the font color from black to green, and it right justified the data. So that is now changed to a numeric value. So I'll give you guys a second to try doing that. And you could also try transforming other columns that you want it to as well. So there's ones very close by to it, such as no members. And so you could go in and edit cells, do common transformations, and then to number, like that. So you can do that to any that you want to change from text to numeric value. So sometimes non-numeric values or blanks occur in a column where numbers are expected. So such values may represent errors in data entry, and we want to find them. So we can do that with a numeric facet, which is very similar to a text facet. Okay, so one thing that I want to do, so for one of the columns that I've transformed to numbers, I'm going to purposely make some mistakes here so that I can show you how to change them. So for the first two ones, I'm going to go to edit, and I'm going to choose my data type as text, and then I'm going to type in ABC. I'm just going to purposely mess up these two to show you a numeric facet. All right, so then I'm going to go to drop-down menu, facet, and then numeric facet. Okay, perfect. So it looks a little different with a numeric facet. They show it visually as a graph, but it includes all the different types of errors that could occur in a numeric value cell. So it could be non-numeric, for example, like letters, like ABC. It could be blank, or it could be some other type of error. So then I can unselect it here, so that I'm only looking at the ones that have numeric value. Or at this case, I could easily, because it's only two, I could I could look at these visually and think, okay, I got to change these. So then I could go back and change it to what it was. I don't remember what the numbers were, so I'm just going to undo this step. But this is something that if you knew the answer, then you could easily change it in something like that. And this is where you could also use if you're working with a really, really large data set, you could use some regular expressions to replace large amounts and transform those data. But because this is a relatively small data set, I'm only, there's only 2 here that are incorrect. So I could easily change these back to numbers. But that's essentially, a quick overview of how numeric values work, and then how you can look at numeric facets. So again, they look a little differently. They look like it looks like a graph on the left-hand side, but it's really, I find it very helpful that it picks out the type of error and it shows you one, so then you can click and unclick and kind of play around with everything. How is everyone doing so far? Maybe I could get some thumbs up. Does anyone have any questions?
Megan?
Sorry? Yeah.
I've got a question. When I did my numeric facet, I actually don't see the little pop-up down below. Does that only happen once you introduce errors?
So for example, so let me go back then. So you didn't enter any errors manually, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, so then it won't show up.
Okay, let me try that.
Because I get a little histogram, but I don't have the selections underneath.
Ah.
Okay, same thing. Okay, interesting. Yep. And when you introduce an error after the fact, it doesn't do that. So you have to rerun it.
Yeah, exactly. So in this case, there's no errors when it shows nothing. So yeah, it essentially, you don't really see anything, like you said. But if there was errors, then it would show.
It's just strange. Every other window seems to update on the fly as the data changes, but that one, I guess, only renders once. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Okay. Yeah, so I removed that facet in the changes that I made because I didn't want to keep them. So I went to undo, redo, and I went back 2 steps. All right. Is there anything else I want to cover? Sorry, I talk out loud a bit on examining. Well, the rest of actually that I'm going to be showing is mainly on how to export and save a lot of your stuff. So before we move on to that, I just want to take, because we have a little bit of time, I just want to make sure that if there was anything that you wanted me to go over, we've covered text facets, numeric facets. We've covered clustering, which is ways to detect errors. We've looked at regular expressions, undo, redo function, filtering, and numbers. If there's anything that anybody had any questions about before we kind of move on. I know it goes really quickly. Again, like I don't mean to keep referring to the wiki, but the wiki has a lot of the functions and explains them a little bit more in detail. This is just a really quick overview to kind of get you into see what it visually looks like and how you can kind of manipulate some of the columns and values. So I'll just give us a second. I don't see any hands raised. Can you cluster values when there are multiple values in cells, like in the item's own column? Let's have a look. Right. I'm going to go back here. Right. So I'm going to need to enter in a text facet first. So I'm going to click on facet and then text facet. No, I think I have to use, I'm going to look at cluster, but I'm thinking that I have to apply the split function in regex to be able to really look and separate all the different values. But I'm going to see, yeah, because it's showing what they look like as a string here, which I don't think there's any real meaning to these strings, so if I was to click on cluster, thank you very much for your message. I'm going to play around, see if it picks up anything. Yeah, see, it's really all over the place here. So, essentially, I would say that the easiest way for you to do something like that, because this is not really picking up anything. I'm gonna exit out of this. So if, and maybe you can, okay, you clarified a little bit. Yeah, to replace things like television versus, so it's not the full string, it's just the individual value. So I think the easiest way to do something like that would be to apply the transformation to that one. So the items owned, I'm going to go in, I'm going to go to cells, and then I'm going to go to transform, and then my history. And I'm going to use the split function to split all of the values so then I can look at them that way. What am I missing here? Okay, let me exit out. What items owned, transform. No, I think I applied that one. So now I should be able to go in and I should be able to look at the text facet. I feel like I'm forgetting a step here though. Just kind of talking out loud to myself to figure out. I definitely missed a step, and it's probably because I undid or redo things, that sort of thing. Go to transformations to see what I did. Right. Oh, it's a custom text facet. That's what I'm looking for. Okay. I entered it in the wrong spot. So specifically, to split them all, you need to use a custom text facet. So I was going under edit cells and then transform and entering the split there. But I actually need to go to the drop down menu and then go to facet and then custom facet, because it's a way that I want to look at that facet rather than necessarily, because I don't want to transform and split all of them. I want to be able to leave all the values within that cell. I still want to have the list, but I want to actually, be able to view them. And that's what a facet does specifically. So I'm going to go to my history, and now I'm going to use the reuse function. Okay, sorry that was a bit confusing to follow, but then here, let's see if the clustering, so from what I can see, it does not look like that you can do the clustering using this facet. So yeah, it looks like you can manually go in and change all of the values. So if you happen to notice like a TV or something like that, a TV versus television, you could go in and change them. But that it doesn't appear. But let's try to apply then. Go in. Yeah, so it looks like the clustering function is not available under a custom text facet. There's probably a better answer for that, Kara. Yeah, thank you. But because it uses regex and that sort of thing, I don't think that you can use the clustering. I could be wrong though, but I can't seem to get it to work with that one. But depending on how many values that you had in that cell, this is a pretty easy amount to work with. But if you were working with a lot more, I could see that why you would want to use something like clustering. But yeah, hopefully that answers your question. All right. So if I don't have any more questions, I'm going to move into the exporting part of this. Okay. So even though we didn't actually do a whole lot to the data today, we've played around a few different things. This is not totally clean data, but we can pretend that it is and show you the different ways in which you can export the data. So the first one of which is you can work with scripts, and these are to show the specific functions that you've done. So for example, if I've applied, regular expressions and transformed multiple values, and I want to be able to show how I did that, that is something that the JSON script will actually will show in detail. You obviously could describe what you've done, but if you need to actually visually show the commands and the syntax that you've used, you can use a JSON script. So at the top here, I showed here before, you can click on extract, and you can click and choose all of the different changes that you've made that you do want to be included in it. And it will display over here. So I can, unclick, click. It's a very long list. I'm going to copy and paste it. And then I'm going to open up a text editor. So you want something like Notepad if you're using Windows, or TextEdit if you're on Mac, and you're going to copy and paste it into this and save it as a plain text file. So it needs to end in a .txt. And then you're able to, save it. So for example, if you were including it in a paper or something like that, you could save it that way. Or if you were using it as a script that you wanted to apply to other data sets, you can do that as well. So when you are in here, like let's say I'm working with a data set that's almost identical to this one. I need to apply the exact same functions that I did before, but I don't want to go through all the steps. Under the undo redo function, I can click on apply. And so I'm just going to I'm going to go in and I'm going to copy and paste it, even though it's not going to do anything because it's within the same data set. But to show you what it looks like, I'm going to click on apply and Control F, and then click on perform operations. And it will do all of the steps that I've done in one click. Obviously, this only really works when you are using an identical data set pretty well to what you're doing. It pretty much the column names would have to be the same. Most of the value would be the same and so on. But, if that was something that you were working with, then that is something that you could easily do and apply that against another data set. Yeah, so that is pretty easy in terms of the JSON scripts. And then the last piece is exporting the actual file that you're working with. So OpenRefine saves continuously, so you don't have to go in and manually save it every time you make changes. It's something that's done automatically, which is really helpful. But let's say you do want to export something. So you can export a project, and this would be helpful if you wanted to send, again, your raw data and cleaning steps to a collaborator, or share this information with anyone, and you want it specifically in OpenRefine format. You're going to go to export, and then you're going to choose the first option, which is OpenRefine project archive to file. It's going to automatically download a tar.gz file to your download directory. And this, the tar.gz is tells you that it's a compressed file. So it's actually a folder of files which have been compressed. And so you should be able to, if you, depending on what type of system that you're working with, it should be able to expand the file when you double click on it. But this is how you're able to download everything, and this saves all the functions as well, and that you can then show someone, or you can apply someone's project to your own. So this would be a part where you could open it, and if somebody was sharing their file that they've their project that they've worked with you, and you want to be able to apply it to yours, you can open it and try it that way. So the project will include all of the raw data, and then all the cleaning steps that you that were a part of the original project that you work for. And then the last step is exporting clean data. So this is not in the format of OpenRefine and includes all the OpenRefine functions. You simply want the data set, and you want the clean version against the original raw data. So in this, when you're working with files, and specifically when you're working with spreadsheets, your best bet is to use something like the tab separated values, the TSV format, or the comma separated values, CSV. Those are the best choices to work with when you are working with a spreadsheet. So in this case, I'm going to do export right here, and then I'm going to choose the one that I'd like, CSV in this case, and then download it. So that file then can be opened in a spreadsheet program. So you can open that in Excel or Google Sheets. And it will also be recognized if you wanted to import it into something like R or Python and do even more functions. R and Python are actually offered at the same time as this workshop. So, but it's if you're familiar with either of those languages, you can apply it there. So yeah, TSV, CSV file improves the ability of yourself and others to use your data. It's your best case rather than using the Excel spreadsheet like XLS and so on. Graham, you had a question?
Yeah, thanks for this. This is really helpful. I was just exploring the export options, and I've seen that some people have used that to export using like a custom template. So if you go export templating, you can enter in you can export the values to like XML or HTML or something like that by changing each of the values in those 4 or 5 different text fields there. If you're like doing the same export again and again, is there a way to like save time so you don't have to like copy in the same templating code into all 5 of those boxes? In other words, is there a way to like automate the exporting like we did with the extract feature earlier?
That's a good question. I feel like, having a script, you might have to use some other type of language. Wade, I know you don't know as much about OpenRefine, but as somebody who probably knows more languages than I do you think this is something then that you're able to do with OpenRefine?
Sorry, can you restate the question? I was typing in chat to another question while you said that.
It might be a more advanced feature, something where you'd kind of have to extend it or hack it. But I was basically wondering, like earlier we could save the different transformation steps and then reapply them to a different data set to like really make that quicker. I'm wondering if using the templating export thing that's shown on the screen here, if there's a way of like repeating any customizations we enter at that stage as well. So if we were playing around with the...
I would hope that they could all be saved and reapplied. I'm assuming that's why they saved it in something like JSON, because it's incredibly reusable that way.
Yeah.
Right. So
maybe I just need to do some more Googling or something. But...
yeah. If you open, let me just see here.
Yeah. That might be taking us off track too, but that I could see that being a really powerful feature if there's a way to kind of repeat customization of templates when you're exporting as well.
this is the tar.gz file that it creates? Isn't that JSON?
No, so this one specifically is the and I can't see the bottom of it for some reason. It won't let me.
Yeah, it just says reset template, export, or cancel. Those are the options at the bottom.
Okay, let me. Oh, there we go. So then if okay, so it exports it in a text file. So it looks like this is a JSON script. Yeah, so I'm not familiar with the templating feature. So I wonder like how that is different from the JSON script itself. So it looks like you can kind of break down some of the sections a bit. Yeah, I don't really have an answer for you, Graham, I don't think.
No, that's okay. Yeah.
But I'm thinking that, like you said, there's probably a way, because that script is so customizable and can be used within different languages and things like that. But yeah, maybe I don't quite understand the question completely, just because I haven't used the templating feature before.
No, that's fair. Thank you. And yeah, I'll look into it too, just out of curiosity. But thank you.
Not a problem.
If you find it in the over the course of this winter session, dump something in Slack there.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, exactly. And maybe I can ask others too, like my the co-instructor Pierre-Luc, who's doing the French version. Maybe he knows as well, so I can ask him about the templating, because I haven't looked into that. So at this point, I think I might stop. I might stop recording because I think I've covered most of the points. So I want to leave a minute or two for questions. So I'm going to stop.